Qing's Prose 11th class talk about equality between men and women. There is a passage in Zhuozhuan that divides human beings into 10 levels, saying, "Heaven has 10 days, and people have 10 levels. The lower ones are responsible for the things above, and the higher ones are the gods. Therefore, kings and ministers, public ministers and officials, officials and ministers, and scholars and ministers are all together. Zhou Chen Yu Chen Li, Li Chen Liao, Lao Akin servant station." Mr. Lu Shun saw that Tai had no ministers. It was too painful, so he comforted him and said that there was no need to worry. There was a wife who was even meaner than him. The weaker one is there, but the son is just weak. When he grows up, he becomes stronger and can be promoted to stage. However, the wife is destined to be humble and will never turn around and will always be an 11th class person. Of course, it is extremely painful to be the 11th class. Their only hope is to find a wife as soon as possible. Although asking for a daughter-in-law does not allow one to rise to a higher level and even be called Taiwan alongside the 10th level men, it does add up to a higher level below. Suppose the new daughter-in-law's grade is the 11th grade B, then she herself is the 11th grade A, which would make her feel much more comfortable. Of course, the hope of upgrading depends entirely on having a son. Without a son, there would be no wife. Not to mention that in the 11th class, you can't distinguish between Class A and Class B. I'm afraid that if you commit one of the 7 mistakes, you won't be able to secure even the lowest status. Isn't that sad? But this is a pity for future generations. Women at that time would never think of getting involved in such things. Even if there are a few people who can think about it, they don't dare to think about it. Not daring to think about things that men don't allow them to think. Not daring not to think about things that men want them to think about, and always and everywhere acting with consideration for their husband's temperament. This is the so-called womanly virtue. Not to mention that men call them the 11th class. Of course they take obedience as evidence. Even if men ask them to cancel their human qualifications, they will definitely lose their children without violating the law. Until the development of the idea of freedom and equality in modern times, the 10 levels among men no longer exist. In name only no longer exists. There is a Nora. The appearance of Nora brought infinite excitement to millions of women. From then on, they had a new ideal, an idea of unwillingness to feel inferior. They know that they are human beings, just like men. The reason why they were forced to be lower than men in the past was because they could not be financially independent. So the brave Noras began to look for careers in the metropolis. Turn out, some cannot be found, some are unstable, somewhat depraved. Of course, there are some who are successful, but only in the minority. Moreover, among these few successful people, there is a common phenomenon that after they succeed in their careers, they fail in marriage and raising children. So many people advised the Noras to go back home. The Noras themselves felt bored and wanted to go back home. But what has become of the situation at home? Most husbands no longer regard their wives as an 11th class person. On the contrary, they regard her as an all-wise and all-powerful God. He asked her, first, to have new knowledge and old morality. The so-called old morality here, of course, refers to women's morality and the like. That is much more difficult than when I was an 11th class person who only said it is virtue for a woman to have no talent. Second, be able to manage both internally and externally. Inside the house is washing, cooking and raising children, while outside the house is attending banquets, visiting guests, socializing and dancing. Although women in the past would ride in 8-person sedans to the government offices and worship concubines Yan as their godmother, the number of social sins they suffered was never as high as that of modern women. Moreover, men must be decent. Even though the wife behaves like an old Jiangbai woman at home, she behaves like an envoy's wife outside. Third, if they cooperate, stay or leave. In the past, although men regarded women as his slaves, cattle and horses, they were always willing to raise her, teach her, and ask them to bear sons to pass on their seeds to the next generation, and to live with him until they grow old and die. And what about today's men? But they want the horse to be good, but they also want the horse not to eat grass. Once the horse gets old, or if the horse is not yet old but you are tired of riding it, you want to kick it away immediately and get a new one to ride. Kicking a wife away is just a matter of a few $1,000s in alimony. It is the most difficult legal matter between husband and wife. Can the judicial police force him into the house? So women are miserable. Women are in trouble. Although women have leapt from the 11th class to become equal to men, their lives have become even more difficult and difficult. But what to do? Some people say, in fact, it is better for women not to be liberated. Even if they are an 11th class person, there are still people to work for, children to raise, and a stable life. This is a retro discussion. They see that the current environment for women is bad and that they want to be slaves but cannot get it. They think that they must want to go back to the past when they were 11th class people. That is their observation error. I dare say that there is no such thing in the world. This is like a person whose bound feet are enlarged, even though the feet are so large that they can travel hundreds of miles every day, and the soles of their feet are blistered due to walking. Would they be willing if they were asked to still bind their feet and stop walking? No, they would rather practice running hard than have their feet bound. What's more, men's thinking has also changed now. What they hope for their wives is that women should be more virtuous, or referring to the morality of slaves of the 11th class, and that women should provide their own food. That means that even if women have their feet bound, they had to run away, which completely stopped their idea of going retro. There is only one way before a woman, and that is upward, up, up. But to what extent we have to go upward is also worth discussing. Many people say that the purpose of women's liberation is to seek equality between men and women. As they say, women's desires are too small and their demands are too low. Because according to the current situation, most men are really not happy. They also want to be slaves but cannot do so. They are not even guaranteed a minimum living standard. I don't know what women envy them. If women demand equality, it is not to demand equal suffering with modern men, is to demand equal enjoyment with men in the future ideal society. Then women will also have their own special happiness to ask for. Is there no other higher hope besides equality with men? Regardless of whether this thing, equality, is something you need. Just because it has been despised by others before, seeking it one by one is a vindictive behavior. I believe that everything in the universe is never truly flat. The water surface is flat, but the bottom of the river varies in depth. And what's the benefit of being even? If people do not hunt animals, people will lose the joy of hunting, and animals will lose the joy of escaping. In other words, people will not have to worry about returning in vain, and animals will not have to worry about falling into traps by mistake. In this way, humans and animals are equal. But what is the point of everyone being carefree and joyless, unable to live a happy life? The same goes for people. When men and women were unequal like in the past, men were happy and women were unhappy. Nowadays, men and women are equal in name but not in reality. Therefore, it is meaningless for women to fight for it and for men to be stingy. I believe that in the future, when men and women are truly equal, neither man nor woman will be happy, even though they and their struggles have finally come to an end. Women give birth to children, but men do not. This is where men and women are most unequal. Women still demand equality with men, but why don't we all give birth to children? Or do you hope to receive better treatment than men when giving birth to children? I dare to say that a woman's need for the right to vote and recall is never more important than her need for the right to rest during her menstrual period. A woman's love for art and music is never more profound than her love for the smiles and voices of her children. I'm not saying that women have to be slaves to their physical bodies for the rest of their lives. I hope that they can first satisfy their reasonable and urgent physiological needs, and then enjoy other so-called equal rights with men. Not everything a man has is good. Anything a man can enjoy may not necessarily be useful to a woman. This concept must be made clear. Happiness is about satisfying one's own needs, not about cutting one's feet to fit one's shoes, or using what others are suitable for to meet one's own different needs. If you do this, it will only show your jealousy, shallowness, and pity, and you are still far from the realm of success. A woman who is used to being the 11th class. You seem to be getting on the elevator now. Actually, it is better to take the stairs. It rises too fast, so be careful not to get dizzy and fall into somersaults. Especially when you arrive at your destination and the elevator stops, you must follow Newton's laws of motion. That is the truth.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.